Every morning at 4:30 a.m. sharp, he would arrive. Never spoke to anyone, just did his job and left. The doctors called him the quiet man. Until that night in the emergency room, when he held a patient bleeding out, and someone noticed the faded tattoo on his arm. Welcome to Duty Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden service and unexpected heroism, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Nobody knew his real name. On the hospital roster, he was listed simply as maintenance, night shift. Robert Hayes. No middle initial, no emergency contact, just a social security number and a start date from 15 years ago. He wore the same thing every night. Navy blue scrubs that had faded to gray, white sneakers that squeaked softly on the linoleum, and a baseball cap pulled low over withered features. St. Mary's Medical Center was a level 1 trauma hospital in downtown Phoenix. The kind of place where miracles and tragedies happen side by side, where young residents learned that medicine wasn't just science. It was war against time, against death, against hopelessness. The emergency department never slept, never stopped, never gave anyone a moment to breathe. Hayes had seen it all. 15 years of late-night emergencies. 15 years of watching doctors fight battles they sometimes lost. He cleaned around the chaos. Empty trash bins filled with bloody gauze. Mopped floors stained with tears and desperation. And through it all, he remained invisible. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had been working the night shift for 3 years. She was tough, competent, and observant. The kind of doctor who noticed details others missed. She'd seen Hayes countless times, moving through the hospital like a ghost. Always early, always quiet, always gone before the day shift arrived. "You ever wonder about the janitor?" she'd asked Dr. Chin once, during a rare quiet moment at 2 a.m. "Hayes, what about him?" "I don't know. He moves differently. Have you noticed? Like he's always watching the exits, always aware of who's around him." Dr. Chin had shrugged. Probably just old military habits. Half the hospital staff were veterans. But Sarah had noticed other things too. The way Hayes organized his cart with military precision. The way he folded towels into perfect squares. The way he never startled, even when gurneys came crashing through the doors with sirens wailing. Most telling of all, Hayes never left during trauma calls. Most staff cleared out when the really bad cases came in: car accidents, gunshot wounds, the kind of emergencies that turned the ER into a controlled chaos of shouting doctors and sprinting nurses. But Hayes would find a corner, stay out of the way, and keep working. Like he belonged there. Like he'd seen worse. October 15th started like any other Tuesday night. Hayes arrived at 4:30, clocked in without speaking to the security guard, and began his rounds. The ER was busier than usual. Flu season was starting early, and a multi-car accident on I-10 had brought in 4 patients around midnight. Dr. Mitchell was suturing a cut on a teenager's forehead when the call came in. Incoming trauma. GSW to the chest. ETA 3 minutes. The familiar surge of adrenaline hit her as she handed off her patient to a nurse. Gunshot wound to the chest meant blood loss, potential cardiac involvement, possible lung collapse. She grabbed her trauma gown and gloves, muscle memory taking over. Hayes was cleaning near the trauma bay when the ambulance arrived. The paramedics burst through the doors, wheeling a gurney, their voices sharp and urgent. 22-year-old male, single GSW to the left chest, vitals dropping fast. Dr. Mitchell and her team swarmed the patient. Young man, barely older than a kid, wearing what looked like military fatigues. His face was pale, breathing shallow, and blood was seeping through the pressure bandages the paramedics had applied. "Give me 2 units of Oneg-Stat." Dr. Mitchell called out, "And Prepor 3. That's when everything went wrong. The patient's vitals crashed. His blood pressure plummeted. Heart rate spiked dangerously high. Dr. Mitchell worked frantically, but she could see what was happening. Internal bleeding, probably a damaged artery. They needed to get him to surgery immediately, but he was losing blood faster than they could replace it. "He's not going to make it to the OR," whispered Dr. Chen. The young soldier's eyes fluttered open for a moment. He was trying to say something, his lips moving weakly. Dr. Mitchell leaned closer. My team," he whispered. Tell them I—" His eyes closed. The heart monitor showed a dangerous rhythm. That's when Hayes stepped forward. Without a word, without asking permission, he moved to the side of the gurney. His movements were calm, deliberate, professional. He placed one weathered hand on the young soldier's shoulder. "Hey there, warrior," Hayes said quietly, his voice steady and strong. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Something in his voice made Dr. Mitchell pause. There was authority there, confidence born from experience. Hayes wasn't speaking like a janitor offering comfort. He was speaking like someone who'd been in command. "What's your name, son?" Hayes asked, though the patient couldn't answer. Hayes reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a coin that caught the fluorescent light. He placed it gently in the soldier's hand. "Hold on to this," he said. "It's from someone who understands." Dr. Mitchell glanced down at the coin. Even in the chaos, she could see it was military, some kind of unit challenge coin. But Hayes had already moved, helping to adjust the 4 lines with practiced efficiency. "Doctor," Hayes said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The bleeding's from the subclavian artery. You need to get pressure here." He indicated a spot on the patient's chest with surgical precision. Dr. Mitchell stared at him. Hayes was right, and his assessment was exactly what she'd been thinking. But how did a janitor know battlefield trauma medicine? She didn't have time to ask questions. Following Hayes' guidance, she applied pressure to the indicated area. The bleeding slowed. "Better," Hayes nodded. "Now you can get him upstairs." The team rushed the patient to surgery. As they disappeared through the doors, Dr. Mitchell realized Hayes had blood on his scrubs, not unusual for a trauma. But as he reached to adjust his cap, his sleeve rode up. That's when she saw it. On Hayes' forearm, faded and weathered but unmistakable, was tattoo. Not a decorative piece, not something from a parlor. This was military ink, the kind earned through service. A Navy SEAL trident surrounded by a date, 1987 to 2012. 25 years of service. Dr. Mitchell stood frozen, staring at the marking. Hayes noticed her gaze and quietly pulled his sleeve down. "Doctor," he said simply, "your patient's going to make it." She blinked, trying to process what she'd just seen. You were a SEAL." Hayes was already moving away, gathering his cleaning supplies. "I'm a janitor, doctor. Have been for 15 years. But that tattoo." He paused, looked back at her with eyes that had seen too much. "That was a long time ago. Why are you here? Why cleaning floors instead of—" "Because," Hayes said quietly, "this is where I'm needed." Dr. Mitchell watched him disappear around the corner, her mind racing. A Navy SEAL, working as a hospital janitor. 25 years of service, probably including some of the most dangerous missions in recent military history, and he was emptying trash cans and mopping floors. She pulled out her phone and did something she'd never done before. Looked up Hayes' name in the hospital directory. Robert Hayes, hired 15 years ago. No previous employment listed, no references, no background beyond a clean security check. But 15 years ago was 2008. Hayes would have retired from the SEALs around 2012, according to his tattoo, which meant he'd taken this job fresh out of the military, leaving behind a career that most people could only imagine. The young soldier survived surgery. Dr. Patterson, the trauma surgeon, found Dr. Mitchell in the break room around 6 a.m. "Hell of a case tonight," he said, pouring coffee. "Kid was lucky you caught that arterial bleed when you did." "Actually," Dr. Mitchell said slowly, "it wasn't me who identified it." She told Dr. Patterson about Hayes, about the guidance he'd provided, about the tattoo she'd seen. Dr. Patterson listened with growing amazement. "A SEAL," he whispered, "working night maintenance. 25 years of service, according to the ink." Dr. Patterson shook his head. "You know what this means, don't you? A guy like that, with that background, he's seen trauma that makes our worst nights look like practice." Dr. Mitchell nodded. It all made sense now. Hayes' calm in emergencies, his precision with medical equipment, his ability to assess trauma wounds. He wasn't just a janitor who happened to be helpful. He was a combat medic, a warrior who traded his uniform for scrubs, but never stopped serving. Over the following weeks, Dr. Mitchell watched Hayes differently. She noticed things she'd missed before. The way he positioned himself during trauma calls, always where he could assist if needed. The way he spoke to veteran patients, using military terminology that put them at ease. The way he seemed to know exactly which supplies would be needed before anyone asked. She also noticed that he never took credit, never drew attention to himself. When she'd mentioned his help with the gunshot victim in her incident report, Hayes had quietly asked her to remove his name. "I'm just here to clean, doctor," he'd said. Nothing more. But Dr. Mitchell had done her research. She looked up Navy SEAL operations between 1987 and 2012. She'd read about missions in Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. She'd learned about the kinds of men who volunteered for the most dangerous assignments, who disappeared for months at a time on classified operations. And she'd realized that Robert Hayes wasn't just any veteran. The timing of his service meant he'd been part of some of the most significant military operations of the past 3 decades. The kind of warrior whose very existence was classified. 3 weeks after the shooting victim, Dr. Mitchell was working another night shift when Hayes appeared beside her desk. "Doctor," he said quietly, "word is you've been asking questions." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "I have. Might be best if you didn't." "Why?" she asked. "Because you don't want people to know who you really are." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Because some stories don't need telling." "But they do," Dr. Mitchell insisted. "Do you have any idea how many people you've helped here? How many lives you've touched?" "I clean floors," Hayes said simply. "You do a lot more than that, and you know it." Hayes pulled up a chair, sat down slowly. For the first time in 15 years, he looked tired. "Doctor," he said finally, "when you spend 25 years in the teams, you see things. You do things. You lose people who matter more than your own life." He paused, staring at his hands. "When I retired, I had 2 choices. I could write a book, do the interview circuit, make money off stories that got good men killed, or I could find another way to serve." "So you became a janitor?" "I became useful," Hayes corrected. "Every night, I come here and I help save lives. Maybe not the way I used to, but it's still service. It's still meaningful." Dr. Mitchell felt tears prick her eyes. "But nobody knows. Nobody recognizes what you've done." Hayes smiled for the first time since she'd known him. "Doctor, the men I serve with, they know. The people whose lives we saved, they know. And now, when that young soldier wakes up and asks about the man who held his hand in the trauma bay, he'll know too." He stood up, gathered his supplies. "That's enough recognition for me." From that night forward, Dr. Mitchell never spoke about Hayes' background to anyone else, but she watched him work with new respect, new understanding. And sometimes, late at night when the ER was quiet, she'd see him sitting with patients who couldn't sleep, veterans mostly, recognizing something in each other that civilians couldn't understand. Hayes never told war stories, never spoke about his missions, but his presence, calm, competent, unshakable, spoke louder than any medal ever could. He was still just a janitor on the hospital roster, but to those who knew his story, Robert Hayes was something more. Reminder that service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Sometimes it just takes a different form. 6 months later, the young soldier Hayes had helped in the trauma bay return to the hospital, not as a patient, but to find the man who'd given him the challenge coin that night. "I heard there was a janitor," he told Dr. Mitchell. "Someone who helped save my life." Dr. Mitchell smiled. "He's here every night, but if you want to thank him, just remember what he taught you about service." The soldier nodded, understanding, because some heroes don't need parades or recognition. They just need to know that what they do matters. And Robert Hayes, mopping floors in a downtown hospital, serving in the only way he knew how, was exactly where he belonged. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone like Hayes? Someone whose quiet service made a difference in ways you never expected? Share their story in the comments, because here at Duty Stories, we believe the most powerful service often happens in silence. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to help us honor those who never stopped serving, even when the world stopped watching. And remember, sometimes the most important battles are fought not on foreign soil, but in the quiet moments when one person decides to help another. Until next time, if you see someone serving quietly in the background, take a moment to appreciate what they might be carrying. You never know what story they're not telling.